This is Rhianna Reagan on Building the Better Human, Restoring Function. So, to start out with, what's actually happened here is that a car accident has completely dislocated this person's hip joint. So, it's been damaged to the point of almost total disrepair. There's almost no way that we could actually repair this without having to totally replace those elements that have been destroyed. To start out with, we're going to talk about the bones and bone markings involved in this joint. So the os coxa is basically the hip bone, the ilium, ischium, and pubis, and the part that actually articulates with the femur to make up the hip joint is called the acetabulum, and that has been pointed out here. That is the cup or the socket part of the ball and socket joint. And here, this is the femur, which is also involved, but the head of the femur is the main marking that is involved in the hip joint. And that has been labeled here, along with the neck and the trochanters greater and lesser. As you can see, the ligamentum teres attaches the head of the femur to the acetabulum, so that is one of the main markings, and the neck is what is encapsulated by the articular capsule, and all the ligaments there is partially involved in that as well. And so going from the outside in, we are going to talk about the articular capsule of the hip joint. It is surrounded by several extracapsular ligaments, including the pubofemoral ligament that goes from the pubic bone over to the head and neck of the femur. And then you have the ischiofemoral ligament that goes from the ischium to the femur, and the iliofemoral ligament that goes from the ilium to the femur. And also, those ligaments are quite important because they actually help us to stand and to extend our hip. So with those being damaged, it is difficult to perform normal functions. And then we also have the acetabular labrum. That is a fibrocartilage lip that is attached to the outer margins of the acetabulum, and so it's actually able to give a bit more stability when it comes to those ligaments and the articular capsule in order for it to be as strong as it should be so that it can be stable. And then we also have the ligamentum teres. It's usually slack, but it does supply a very important artery to the femoral head and the femur. Without this artery, avascular necrosis may occur, which would mean that the femoral head would actually die. So without the ligamentum teres, we would not be able to walk or stand or really anything. Onto the actual structure and function of the joint and how it is built. It is a multi-axial diarthrosis joint. So it is a synovial joint. All synovial joints are diarthroses, and of course this means that the joint articulates inside of a fluid-filled capsule filled with synovial fluid. And diarthrosis just means that the joint is freely movable in some direction, and multi-axial means that it is freely movable in multiple directions, not just across one or two planes. So it can actually move in several different directions, just like the glenohumeral joint or the shoulder joint, but it is not quite as movable as that joint because it is much more stable than that joint, in part because of the incredibly strong articular capsule and those ligaments. And of course, this is also a ball and socket joint. As you can tell from the acetabulum and the head of the femur, the ball is the head of the femur and the acetabulum is the socket, as was mentioned earlier. And now on to what actually happened So again, this person was involved in a car accident. This caused something to happen inside of the car where their hip was totally dislocated, hyperextended to the point where those extracapsular ligaments, the iliofemoral, ischiofemoral, and pubofemoral ligaments, have all been torn or almost totally torn. They are kind of attached, as you can see, to each part, each of those markings, but they have been stretched to the point where they can't really function the way that they should be anymore. And that ligamentum teres, as you can see, this is kind of a see-through version, but as you can see, the ligamentum teres has been extended to the point where it's been damaged, and that artery that is inside ligamentum teres has been partially exposed. So while it hasn't been totally unattached from the femur, the femoral head is still getting that blood supply. It is at risk. It is it could take one little motion and it's snapped. And so now when it comes to structure and function and how they relate with one another, of course, this is a multi-axial diarthrosis synovial joint, and it is a ball and socket joint. And without these completely stable ligaments and articular capsule that has been damaged, the joint cannot move the way that it should. It cannot move on a multi-axial plane, and because it's been totally dislocated, and those ligaments can't help this person stand or extend their hip because they have been damaged to that point. And so, of course, this person is not going to be able to use their hip the way that they should be using it because all of those things have happened. The ball and the socket cannot articulate with one another, and so this joint has been almost totally destroyed. And so now, this is the solution that I have proposed. It looks a little different from normal or traditional implants. This is kind of a see-through version, just like with the other slides, but there is a little extra stuff happening in addition to what would usually constitute a hip replacement. So on with the more traditional aspects, we have the femoral stem that is going to be implanted into the femur, into the kind of the actual body and the shaft of the femur, and coming out so that it can attach to the ball of the implant. It is going to be made of titanium alloy, Ti6Al4V. The reasoning is this provides strength and stability, and that is very important in the hip joint, as it is very excellent for trying to keep our balance, make sure that we can walk correctly. And now onto the head and the liner. These are basically the replacements for the femoral head, and the actual socket, the articular, the labrum and the articular capsule, and the articular cartilage that would help our hip actually reduce friction. So for the head, it would be ceramic, because this actually reduces friction. Ceramic head and polycarbonate urethane liner. It's much better than metal because there won't be a whole bunch of heat going up and through there. So it's much better than having something like a metal replacement, like some of the older versions. And now for the acetabular cup, I would do porous titanium. Of course, this is something that helps with strength and stability, but also the fact that it is porous titanium helps with osseointegration. So rather than having a cement, you're using osseointegration, which means that it provides a much stronger hold to the existing acetabulum, so that it keeps it from going bad. so fast as some of the older replacements. And now this isn't technically necessary as far as older replacements go, but I feel like this would actually help a lot in order to replace the ligaments. There would be carbon fiber. It is being tested right now to replace ligaments, so I feel that this would be a good replacement for those extracapsular ligaments that are so important in helping us stand. And so this is why I have actually included these as well. And so that is the end of the presentation. Going from having this incredibly damaged hip onto a replacement prosthetic that will help the hip restore function, and even better than the older versions of prosthetics, hopefully, due to adding those ligaments and having a carbon fiber also ligament to keep that ligamentum teres feel, help it to heal, and help it to heal around that artery. And having the elements that I've included, what the actual prosthetic would be made of, should help to improve stability and improve the function and help the ball and socket joint actually move multi-axially as it should. Thank you, and thank you for listening to this presentation. This was Rihanna Reagan, and trying to restore function to this person's hip.